Okay, so today I'm going to have a little bit of a rant, and I must warn you, it's going to be probably a bit guitar nerdy, and potentially a bit long, but it's something that's been bugging me for ages. I've seen some forum posts about this throughout the years, but hardly any people have talked about this, which is really surprising. Today I want to talk about Jackson guitars and a practice that I actually believe is very deceptive. They are redefining industry standard terms to suit themselves, to allow them to cut costs and cheapen out on guitars and giving the impression that they're offering something that they're not. And they're not just cheapening out on their cheap or inexpensive guitars. This same practice is happening all the way up to guitars that are over $8,000. I want to talk about neck construction. I told you it was going to be guitar nerdy, but to do that I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, so let's give you a quick run through of the different types of neck construction that are out there. This is a bolt-on neck guitar. The neck is a different piece of wood than the body. It's bolted on with a couple of screws. That's a bolt-on guitar. They can have different numbers of screws, they can be ergonomic or bulky bolt-ons, but at the end of the day, they are all bolt-on guitars when they are screwed onto the body. That's a bolt-on. And personally, I believe that neck construction affects the sound of a guitar. I think a bolt-on sounds very different from what I'm going to show you next, which is a set neck guitar. But that's a debate for a different day. The next neck construction I want to show you is set neck. So this neck is a set neck. It is glued into the body. Similar, like a bolt-on, the neck doesn't go all that deep. It's in a pocket. So the pocket on a set neck, even though you can't see it like on a bolt-on, kind of goes to around here. It really, some of them are short, some of them are long, but they don't really extend past the neck pickup. Some can, but most kind of stop somewhere around here. They don't go too deep into the body, but they can't be removed like a bolt-on. That's glued in there, but it's an entirely different piece of wood than the body. Set necks can also look a little bit different from each other. This is also an example of a set neck, but it's arguably a much more ergonomic one, where it is smoothed down and shaped to fit your hand so you can reach the high frets. Now, some people mistakenly call this a set-through construction, but it's not. This is a set neck, just like the previous guitar I showed you. It's just a lot less bulky. A set-through is something different and very rare. A real set-through guitar is pretty hard to come by, and the reason being is because there's really only one manufacturer that makes them. David Thomas McNaught is the trademark owner of set-through neck, and that type of construction has a lot of similarities with set neck, except for one. So as I was saying, with set neck, the neck comes into a pocket into the body, and it stops around here, and that's where it's glued in. But a set-through extends the pocket. The pocket goes all the way to past the bridge, but it doesn't hit the end of the body. It stops around here. And it's just a very long pocket. But it's not a deep, full through the body pocket, because the neck is still the neck thickness. It still goes all the way through here, but just long ways. So that's set-through, a pretty rare one. And finally, we have neck through construction. Some people refer to this as through neck construction, but it means the same thing. Neck through and through neck is the same thing. And all it means is that the piece of wood goes all the way from the headstock through the neck and through the body, and not just lengthways, but also thickness ways. As you can see there, that's the thickness of the body is also the neck. The neck, headstock, and body core are all the same piece of wood. So those are the different types of neck construction on an electric guitar. And if we're being realistic, you're probably almost never going to run into a genuine real set-through guitar. You're going to find a bolt-on, a set neck, or a neck-through guitar out in the wild. That's really all that's there. But then what's this? This is a Jackson guitar that is sold and marketed as a neck-through, and it looks like a neck-through on the front, but on the back, it looks like a set neck. After further examination, it seems that the neck only goes into half the thickness of the body, which is a little bit strange. And this isn't just on one guitar, but a bunch of Jacksons. And not just their cheap guitars, but their expensive custom shop range of guitars too. all of them sold as neck-through guitars, but very clearly very different. And the examples that I'm showing you here are the guitars that have see-through backs, but the vast majority of Jacksons have painted backs, so you have to just take their word for it on the construction method when they say neck-through. There's no other way of telling visually how they're constructing this. Here's a little clip from Jackson's custom shop explaining the build process.
This is really the heart of every Jackson neck-through guitar, and you know, we'll chop the angle in the head and we'll glue this on to make our center blank, and these are our wings. But if we have a center blank that's a tighter grain or a little wider grain or something like that, we'll walk up over here and pick the best one.
Wow.
You know?
Okay, I think it's time for a little bit of arts and crafts to explain this further. So on this little diagram, we've got a traditional neck-through blank. It's a big, thick block of wood. And just for reference, the visual point of view that I'm giving you is the guitar has a side profile. So you've got your headstock, your neck, and then your body, okay? So this is your traditional neck-through blank. It's a big, thick chunk of wood. And to make it into a neck blank, a proper neck blank, you have to make some cuts. So we do a cut here, a cut here, remove the wood, and that is your neck through. So you've got your headstock, your neck, and your body chunk of wood ready to go. Now Jackson's neck through is significantly different. Their neck blank starts with a shorter and thinner piece of wood. The piece of wood is about half the thickness of a traditional neck through blank. In other words, Jackson can get 2 guitar necks out of every other company's 1 guitar neck. They then glue on a completely different piece of wood for the headstock, then glue on a completely different chunk of wood for the back of the body, i.e. the back of the neck. As you can see here, very different setups. Now the selling point of a neck through guitar is that it is the same piece of wood. People claim that it's got the same vibrations throughout the entire piece of wood. It's all resonating. And even the luthiers at Jackson are claiming that the same pieces of wood have some resonance potential.
A lot of times, you know, it is the practice to make the wings, the back strip, all from the same piece of lumber. So it all kind of resonates together, and it you know, has a unified sound.
And if that is the case, then what Jackson are doing, even on their custom shop models, makes zero sense apart from, well, financially. This is a screenshot from the Jackson custom shop tour that Premier Guitar did, and there's a link to that video in the description. But as you can see, this is a side profile of a real Jackson neck in construction. The headstock is a completely different piece of wood. It is then glued on to a thin piece of wood that makes up the rest of the neck, and then the core of the body, or the bulk of the body, is a much thicker piece of wood glued onto the back of that neck piece of wood. And whether you believe neck construction affects the sound of a guitar or not, Jackson do, and they use it as a selling point. On Jackson's website, they argue that neck through allows for greater playability, warmer tonal spectrum, and enhanced sustained. This particular construction makes me think about the neck pickups, for example, or just the pickup routes in general. How deep do those routes go? That piece of wood is looking awfully thin. I can't imagine a pickup route leaves a whole lot of wood left. Once there's a neck pickup route, I wonder just how close it is away from being a set neck. A real neck through, where the whole piece of wood that you're seeing is the same piece, wouldn't have this problem. Okay, so let's talk about scarf joints. Now, a scarf joint is a way of building a neck that is a little bit more cost effective. It's cheaper to do because it saves wood. So when you're building a neck on your headstock, it can be one of 2 ways. It can either be straight or it can be angled. On a straight headstock, it's pretty straightforward. Excuse the pun. The headstock is straight in line with the neck. So if you can see there, it's going to be the same piece of wood because it doesn't need to not be. The other way a headstock can be is angled. So on this particular example, the headstock is angled back and it's pulling the strings over the nut. And to do this, you've got 2 options. The first way is the more premium way. You require a bit more wood. So the wood required to make this headstock tilt back would have to come to here. So the amount of wood going through, you'd have to cut a lot away into the neck, but you're getting the headstock as one piece angled back. There is a cheaper way of doing it. If you've got a piece of wood that's too thin to carve out a headstock and have it a one piece, you can do a scarf joint, which means that you cut the headstock or the neck at an angle, and then you, this way, you glue it back on like that. And now you've got your angled headstock. This is primarily done on budget guitars like this LTD. This was a budget and inexpensive guitar, and on it you've got a... It's hard to see on camera. If I get a light on it though, you'll be able to see it. Yeah, see there? It's a different piece of wood for the headstock and that almost oval arch shape. Is it a bad way of constructing a headstock? Absolutely not. But it is cheaper for the manufacturer to do, and that's why it's primarily on cheaper guitars. Now, some people argue that the grain orientation of a scarf joint, it actually makes the joint stronger than if the neck was just carved out of one piece of wood with the headstock at an angle. And they often cite that Gibson's headstocks break frequently, and this is because of the grain orientation. And while that might be one factor, there are several factors about Gibson's headstock breakage. To take a look at what I mean, this is a diagram of two different types of construction. We've got the no-joint headstock, so it's all carved out of one piece of wood and the grain is running in one direction. And then you've got the scarf joint, where it's two separate pieces and the grain is running at a different direction. But when we look at Gibson headstocks and why they're prone to breakage, well, there's several other important factors. For example, how much wood is removed from the headstock for the truss rod. This is a side profile of a Gibson headstock cut in half, and as you can see, when the truss rod nut is routed out, there's very little wood left of the headstock to begin with. Of course, this is going to be a weak point. There's also the angle of the headstock. The pitch is 17 degrees. And in comparison to something like a PRS headstock, that's just 11 degrees. So it's angled much further back. It's got very little wood after the truss rod is routed out. Of course, if it takes a hit, it's going to be much more prone to breakage than something that isn't like that, like 70s Les Pauls, where they did actually fix both of those problems. In the 70s, they adjusted the headstock pitch to 14 degrees and added a volute to the back of the headstock. A volute, like seen here, is just an extra piece of wood on the back of the headstock that gives an extra bit of strength and rigidity to a one-piece headstock, so it's a lot stronger where you would route out for the truss rod. Gibson fixed both of those problems on their guitars, but their customer base is so heavily in on 50s guitars, they did go back to the original construction, which is, in my opinion, inferior. But the point is that there are a lot of reasons that Gibson headstock breaks, and it's not just the one-piece construction. It also doesn't mean that scarf joints are immune to breakage either. In fact, if you look at scarf joint breaks, you Google neck breaks that aren't Gibson's, a lot of the time you'll see a breakage around the scarf jointed area. So they're not immune to breakage. I guess the takeaway is look after your guitars and don't drop them. And the thing about scarf joints is, like I showed you, I took one piece of wood that was too thin, cut it, and then flipped it, right? So it's still the same piece of wood, it's just cut and glued. Jackson aren't doing that. It's a different piece entirely.
If we have a center blank that's a tighter grain or a little wider grain or something like that, we'll walk up over here and pick the best one.
Wow.
You know?
So why are we talking about the same pieces of wood resonating? Like, pick a lane. But the bit that really gets me about what Jackson is doing is that they know full well what they're doing isn't necessarily neck through. And how I get that impression is, well, from their website. So let me read out what they describe about this guitar. So this guitar that they're selling is a Pro Plus Series Soloist. And on the back, as you can see, it's actually a genuine real neck through. The neck, as you can see it, it's going all the way through. And what they say is through body 3-piece maple walnut neck construction. True through neck body construction has been a Jackson hallmark since 1980, allowing for greater playability, warmer tonal spectrum, and enhanced sustain. This method of guitar construction involves seamlessly extending 2 pieces of maple and a centerpiece of walnut wood used for the neck through the entire length of the body. Okay, now let's take a look at another guitar which we know isn't necessarily the real neck through. I would add that we know this because we have to assume that any guitar with a scarf joint has this completely different neck through construction. That's the only way of telling. So here's a guitar, a X Series Soloist, and the back of it is painted, so you actually can't see the construction. But what they say is almost exactly the same as to what I just read out, except for one major difference. This is neck-through body construction has been a Jackson hallmark since 1980. Previously it was true neck-through body construction. So one is true, and the other is what I could only be led to believe is false neck-through body construction, because it is only half the thickness of the body. And I do want to stress that this isn't necessarily a bad thing either. In fact, there are artistic reasons to do it. I have actually seen it. I've only seen it once, but it made so much sense. It was really cool. It was at the Birmingham Guitar Show. It was done by a luthier called Hilditch, and he had made a guitar out of one-piece flamed ash. That was the body. And he thought that the piece of bodywood looked so good that he didn't want to cut all the way through it and just have the neck at the back, so he left 5mm of the bodywood and put what would have been a neck through into that.
So obviously you can't see it on the back, but it goes all the way through. You look on the end.
Oh wow, but just this thin layer here.
Yeah, just left 5mm on the back of the body. Because I just thought that the bodywood was just a bit too nice to get rid of a huge section of it. I just liked it.
It is pretty, like, you've got this really pretty, like, almost flamed ash.
It is, yeah.
That was an artistic way of doing what Jackson are doing. It wasn't done to cut costs. It was done because the wood of the body looked really good. Jackson could do that, but they're not doing that. I'll show you an example of an $8,500 guitar. Right, here we are, an $8,575 guitar. This is a Jackson Custom Shop Kelly, and I have no problem with expensive guitars. I like expensive guitars. But, you know, convince me why it's expensive. We spared no expense, so it's expensive. Cool. But when Jackson are openly sparing expense, there is no reason to do the type of neck construction that they're doing other than to cheap out on it. So look at the back of this Kelly. Same exact concept. There is no artistic reason to do this other than it's cheaper to have the neck thinner. Also, you've got your scarf joint as well. That is not a real neck through. The fact that they have real neck throughs and they call it true neck through, and then they're calling these just neck through, it is, in my opinion, very, very deceptive. No other brand does that. When they make a neck through, it's a neck through. Jackson are redefining industry terms to suit themselves. There's no other reason to do this than to cut the costs on the lumber. And I can't imagine they're saving that much, especially on, like, the custom shop stuff. Like, they're penny pinching on things that they're demanding thousands for. It blows my mind. Okay, I know this video is probably drawing long at this point, but there is one more thing I want to mention that I think is actually quite important to say. Because I showed you this guitar earlier. It's a custom shop, $8,500 guitar on Sweetwater, the Jackson Kelly. And the reason that I showed you this is because it's got the natural back where you can see what's happening. You can see the scarf joint, you can see the back and how the neck is not fully neck through. It's this strange Jackson construction. Now, I previously said in this video, I mentioned how you can kind of assume when a guitar is like this based off their spec list. The spec lists on Jackson's production guitars mention the use of a scarf joint, and you can kind of use that to assume that the rest of the body is this weird construction. But when it comes to custom shop, it is a free-for-all. The specs don't mention anything like this. This is simply a neck-through guitar according to Sweetwater, and I don't even blame them because that's what they're sold from Jackson. Jackson is telling them that this is a neck-through, and that's what they're selling it as, even though it's definitely not anywhere near a traditional neck-through. They're just saying that the core of this Kelly is comprised of a neck-through slab of mahogany that's flanked by matching mahogany sides. There's no mention that there is this chunk on the back, and there's no mention that it's a scarf joint. You just have to assume it, but you can see that because it's a clear, natural finish. But there's a lot of guitars, like I mentioned, that aren't. We can take this completely black Custom Shop Warrior, and you're not going to be able to tell anything on the back of this. Yeah, nothing. So, is that sold as neck through? Let's see the specs. Yeah. Neck through construction provides super unobtrusive heel and unrestrained vibrational transfer. Vibrational transfer. I wonder, do the people who are buying these know exactly how the neck is constructed? Because there is actually no way of telling with these ones. I don't know, it just really rubs me the wrong way. They've been doing this for years. Jackson were one of the originators of neck-through guitars, or at least one of the brands that really popularized it, and they've just kind of turned it completely into something else. They've redefined this industry term to suit themselves. They're saving money where everybody else, any other brand, I can't think of any other brand that does this. Every other brand that says neck through, it's a neck through. Jackson say neck through, it's a kind of neck through, and then it's a true neck through, it's a neck through. Like, I don't like it. I don't even mind that, like, the construction technique, if you want to do it to cut costs on the budget ranges or the medium ranges, that's fine. You can make the guitar cheaper, but, you know, call it what it is, not pretend to be something else, because it's not even fair in a competition standpoint. When another brand is making a guitar that's neck through, it's going to cost a certain amount of money because it's actually neck through. When Jackson do it, they are saving money, and they are trying to compete, especially with the painted necks. That is, like, when the neck's painted like that, to cover up what they're doing, no one's going to be able to tell. Jackson are just kind of, I feel anyway, cheating you. But let me know what you think about this. That's my thoughts. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!